So just how serious is the ANC about rooting out and fighting corruption? Well, in a 7-page letter addressed to members of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosas has urged members to implement the party's resolutions on corruption. These include suspending members implicated in wrongdoing and calling them before the Integrity Commission. Ramaphosas also saying that the party needs to disassociate from such individuals. Let's unpack the story now. We're joined by the party spokesperson, Pule Mabe. Pule, good morning. Thanks very much for your time on the AM report. I think an impassioned letter from the president of the country, from the ANC president, really reading the mood in the country as far as corruption goes. And I'm just reading part of his letter here. He says there is an increase in corruption, and he's reflecting here on the December 2017 conference. He says dishonesty and other negative practices, these are all threatening the goals and the support of the ANC. That was in 2017, and those words are no more true now as we face COVID-19 corruption as well.
Well, morning to your viewers. Of course, the expression made by the President of the African National Congress to the members of the ANC is consistent with the line taken by the last National Executive Committee of the ANC. You would know that we were quite honest and frank on the kind of decisions that we emerged with from the ANC National Executive Committee. We agreed that we need to, in practical ways, be seen to be dealing with this cancer of corruption, and are going to require that our members take a front line and take a decisive stand against corruption. We have said that we need to expose those within our ranks that are involved in corrupt activities or whose conduct contributes towards giving the ANC a bad name, so that society can see that we are serious. We spoke frankly about councillors who were found to be in the wrong as it related to the distribution of food parcels meant to help us fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We have also said, through a letter written out by the Secretary General to our structures, to the chairpersons and secretaries of our provincial and regional structures, that cadres must begin making declaration of their financial and all other interests, so that the party is fully aware of what its cadreship is involved in, especially those that are public representatives. Yeah. So we are able to account and are transparent in our own actions.
So I want to continue to just read some excerpts from the President's letter. Under the heading, "How did we get here?" he says, for more than 26 years, the ANC has been in government at a national level and in most provinces and municipalities. This has meant that leadership positions in the ANC have been seen by some as the most direct route to, in the first instance, employment, and in the second instance, to influence the awarding of tenders and the distribution of other government resources. A little further down there it says, perhaps the best known form of corruption is the award of tenders and other contracts to certain companies based on conflictual relations such as friendships or family connections. Now that's what the President says in his letter. On the flip side of that, the SG of the ANC, says, and we've played that bite here on Newzroom Afrika, that there is absolutely nothing stopping the family of those who are employed by government doing business with government. In fact, his sons, 2 of them, getting COVID-19 tenders to the value of 2.7 million rand.
Well, just to clarify that point, the President speaks about conflictual relations, meaning that if you know that you are conflicted, you sit in supply chain processes, it cannot be that those associated with you are found to also be participating in the same government tenders. You would know that most of the work that related to COVID-19, prices were already set out by the National Treasury. There would not have been instances where people would have come in to put forward their own prices. There would have been an open procurement.
Sorry to interrupt you there. These are 2 separate issues here. The President in his letter talks about the stigma and the stain of government officials getting their family members or friends involved in government business. And he talks about that being one of the biggest challenges to corruption at the moment.
true. I'm going exactly there. That if you know that you are sitting, and I thought that you would have understood the point, because that is the point that I was carrying forward in the narrative, that it can't be that you are involved in supply chain processes and those associated with you have got an unfair advantage. They get pricing upfront and then are even given specifications of such tenders upfront and then go on to participate in such. In fact, one of the things that we have said must happen, and the president letter is pointing to that, it is a view that the ANC has already articulated over time, is that we must begin having an open tender system. Society must participate in these procurement processes. The public must be given an opportunity to scrutinize companies that put forward bids, so that ultimately when these appointments are done, there is no suspicion of some untoward conduct.
Yeah. But Pule, you're still not answering my question, though, about how the president in his letter can say one thing that on paper, if I read it verbatim, I'm not adding any of my own words in here. If I read it verbatim, it is in direct contradiction to things that the SG has said.
Can you just share with me what is saying direct contradiction there?
Well, the president on the one hand says the best known form of corruption is the award of tenders and other contracts to certain companies based on conflictual relations such as friendships or family connections. That is what the president says in his letter.
Can I ask you a simple question? Maybe you and I will be able to find an answer. The Secretary General of the ANC is not in government. The Secretary General of the ANC has clarified the fact that he doesn't influence what his sons, who are consenting adults, do. I think that when we deal with all of these issues broadly, so that we do not enter different terrains, we effectively look at this objectively and then say, what is it that the African National Congress is trying to resolve? Yeah. The fact that the ANC, on its own accord, has come out in this way, it means that the ANC expresses itself without fear or favor. The fact that the Secretary General of the African National Congress has disposed of a letter to structures asking that they should be able to make financial declarations and be able to state if they are those of their family members who could be involved in deals with the state, means that the SG, like all of us, is not afraid to effectively state all of these things. You see, what we want to show society is that we are transparent. It must start with ourselves.
So the SG will be overseeing that process, and he will also be clarifying his own business interests and that of his family with the state.
Not just the SG. All of us in the African National Congress will be doing exactly that. The letter is already gone out. And we are not doing this to please the media or anyone else. We are doing this to self-correct, to say if there are things that we in the ANC would have done that undermined or compromised the confidence that the people of South Africa had in us, then it must start with us. Yeah. And the ANC has over time been the one that went out to self-correct, put measures that ensured that the conduct of its own leaders build the necessary compact we want with society.
So Pule, as you talk about the ANC always going out to self-correct, and certainly this letter from the president, it's very clear in what the issues are within the governing party. And, you know, we talked at the beginning of our interview about the national conference in December 2017, where Gwede Mantashe at the time was talking about the lack of integrity that is perceived by the public to have been taking place within the governing party. If you look back now, almost 3 years later, the words that were said here and the promises that were made to members then in relation to corruption, how far have we come?
Well, you would appreciate the fact that we are coming back in this way, and the fact that we are not being pushed by anyone to do this means that we too appreciate the road and are beginning to say to our broader cadreship and membership that we ought to do things that are exemplary. We ought to, you see, we must remind ourselves from time to time. When you take resolutions, you have got the duty from time to time to remind yourself of the promise you made, not just to your members, but your society broadly. When we went out to contest elections last year, we said that we are going to build an ethical developmental state. We're going to make sure that we have got SOEs where there is a practice of good governance. We have got public officials, public servants who serve people selflessly and all of that. Actually, part of what we're beginning to say is that lifestyle audits must also be conducted around public servants, because these are people who are entrusted with the responsibility of serving our people within government settings. Yeah. So when all of this are done...
Sorry, Pule, I'm really sorry to interrupt you there. If you wouldn't mind me interjecting, because we've run out of time for our interview, I want to quote one more section of the President's letter, and it's part of the bullet points on the second last page of his letter. And here he says, the ANC should publicly disassociate itself from anyone, whether business donor, supporter or member, accused of corruption or reported to be involved in corruption. So how do we read this statement from the ANC president in connection with Zandile Gumede, the former eThekwini mayor, being sworn in just last week as an MPL? How do we read the statement by the ANC president to its members when it pertains to someone like Ace Magashule? And I'm bringing up Ace Magashule again because Peter Tabete was in court last week. He, along with 4 others who stand accused in connection with the Estina Vrede, that failed dairy farm project. Now, we know that Magashule was premier in 2011. That's when he signed off on the Estina dairy project. He then delegated the authority for that project, I'm giving this background for the sake of our viewers, to Mosebenzi Zwane, who was agriculture MEC in the Free State at the time. Zwane then delegated that project to the very Peter Tabete, who appeared in connection on corruption charges just last week. Tabete flew to India with Ashok Narayam, who is a known Gupta associate. Ashok Narayam was then appointed by Magashule as an advisor to the Premier on the Estina Dairy project. So when we read the President's statement in his letter, where he says anyone in connection, even reported to be involved in corruption, how do we read these 2 particular individuals, Pule?
Well, I'm not going to be going into the merits and demerits of your questions. I've got a challenge. I did advise Newzroom that I've got another interview that is scheduled for 6:50. We have got a National Working Committee of the ANC today. We will be able to reflect on all of these things and come back to pronounce ourselves. What we can assure yourselves, the media and the broader South African public, is that we are serious about waging a serious fighting against corruption, putting all of the necessary measures to make sure that our members themselves are the ones that lead the charge in this regard. We are not going to be entering the terrain of matters that are being ventilated upon, whether it is before the State Capture Commission or is out in the court of law. We are going to put ourselves a program that ensures that we are seen to be fighting corruption well within our ranks.
Well, in fact, I don't want you to comment on the merits of a court case. I want you to comment on the merits of what the President has said in this letter regarding individuals who are even seen to be involved in corruption. That's what I want you to comment on.
Yes, I understand that. Unfortunately, I've given you what are my answers to the best of my abilities. I've got to now leave. I've got another interview that started at 6:50. We've got a responsibility to talk to all different media outlets about this important letter from the President. Thanks for having us this morning.
Pule Mabe, just a note there that we had actually had our appointment with Pule Mabe for 6:30, and you, in fact, sir, were a few minutes late. So that's a pity for us as well. But this is where we let you go. ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe joining us there as we continue to reflect on the merits, the really impassioned letter that the President has penned to members of the ANC.